Welcome to the Cutting Edge Health Podcast. I'm Jane Rogers, journalist, health coach, consultant to doctors, and recovering chocoholic. My passion is helping my friends and others squeeze every drop out of life using the latest scientific breakthroughs to make 90 the new 40, extend our health spans by 10 to 20 years, and prevent the diseases of aging. I travel the world interviewing leading experts in health and longevity to learn how to live longer, better. Buckle up. It's never too late to ride the cutting edge to grow younger, sexier, healthier, and sharper together. Research is showing that hyperbaric oxygen therapy has some real potential if you want to slow aging and the age-related diseases that come with it. With recent research from Israel, it's been demonstrated to increase telomere length and get rid of senescent cells, zombie cells, which spew inflammatory molecules, which contribute to aging. It also can help fight bad bacteria. Today's guest is Dr. JoJo Yonce. In his clinics, he is using hyperbaric oxygen therapy, known as HBOT for short. Dr. JoJo Yonce, I'm so glad that you're with us today. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks, Jane. So happy to be here with you.
We have a lot to unpack with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And I know you have several clinics. One of them's in Greenville, South Carolina. Tell me about it. And tell me about the experience your patients are having with this therapy.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. We have an office in Asheville. We have one in Greenville. We have Greenville Brain Training, Asheville Brain Training. Sensorium Neuro Wellness is really our overarching new name that we've adopted. And we do a lot of functional neurology and testing of all aspects of the nervous system. So we're in a really good position to test and see what's working. So we have over a dozen distinct therapies that we do based on the testing that it leads to actionable information about how the brain and the nervous system could be working better. And one of our really cool, most recent tools that we've brought in about a year ago is hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And that is, I've always been really leery about things that, like this article you sent me, let me grab it. What did it say? I'm familiar with Shai Efrati, by the way. He's doing great research in Israel, where they have more open interest around that, where I think they're not as led by the pharmaceutical industry. Holy Grail is the name of the thing, right? So I've always been leery of like things that purport to be good for everybody, right? But that's really what we're finding. As long as you don't have indications that mean that it wouldn't be good for you to do, it's good for humans. Like that's how I look at it, like water and oxygen. So we're really just, one of the special things about hyperbaric oxygen is it's upping the delivery of a nutrient to the body that it's already knows how to use. And that being oxygen.
Oxygen.
Yeah. And that's how we view oxygen, as a nutrient.
So your patients, when they go into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, they're under 200 to 300% more air pressure.
You can go as high as 2 to 3 atmospheres in hard chambers of pressure.
That's a hard chamber. Okay.
Yes. We use 1 to 1.3 atmospheres. We go up to 1.3 atmospheres, which is enough, it turns out, for helping brain health. Yeah.
Okay. And so you do that in a soft chamber, not a hard chamber. So it's kind of like it expands more.
It does. If you go beyond, say, around 2 atmospheres pressure, you really need the hard chamber to maintain that pressure. But if we look at the pressure being delivered in there as equivalent to number of feet underwater, 1.3 atmospheres, which is what we use up to that, is about 10 feet underwater, the same pressure on your body and system as you would experience at about 10 feet underwater. So it's not huge. And what you were referring to is hard chambers can go 2 to 3 atmospheres, which is the equivalent of 66 to 99 feet underwater. So
it's a big difference.
Huge difference, and huge safety considerations around that. Not only at that level of pressure, but at the amount of percentage of oxygen that you're delivering. We use what's called oxygen concentrators, where you're delivering about 90% oxygen in the air that you're breathing versus 100%, which is medical grade that comes in the green tanks that's used in hospital settings. And in hard chambers, that's infused into the entire tank, and people are breathing it as part of the environment. And that has its own considerations around oxygen toxicity and needing to take air breaks, and meaning that what you would breathe through the ported air in would be normal air, not oxygen. We kind of reverse that in the mild hyperbaric oxygen therapy, where you're in a soft chamber going up to 1.3 atmospheres of pressure and staying there about an hour. And what's being ported in is the 90% oxygen, 85 to 93, depending on certain factors. But you're breathing that concentrated oxygen that's not being stored in tanks. So it doesn't have the same level of fire hazard considerations. And it's still over 4 times what we're breathing right now. Right now, you and I are breathing about 21% oxygen in the air. So we're delivering that to you at 90%. So that's one of the main mechanisms of benefit.
And what you're finding then is some real benefit without having to go 60 feet, equivalent of 60 feet under the water.
Totally.
So tell me about what you're seeing in your clients and what you're seeing in some research. There's a whole lot we can unpack with this, but
there's a lot of research, and I'm unfortunately I'm seeing it like starting to split, and you're seeing the people who have the hard chambers, like not recognizing the benefit of the soft chambers. And so I think that's, we were talking earlier about the things that are coming down at the state level considerations, but there was just some research out of University of Minnesota, I think, that is showing that there, as far as the brain is concerned, the soft chamber is providing the same benefits as the hard chamber for brain health.
Without the risk.
Yeah. And there are 14 FDA approved conditions that warrant using hyperbaric oxygen therapy in a medical or in a hospital setting. And that always means hard chamber. So if you're not doing a hard chamber and you're not delivering 100% oxygen, then according to the FDA and the insurance companies, you're not providing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. They equate those. And if you have one, they're charged like thousands of dollars a session from what I've seen. So it's very, very different. And if you go with a head injury or some of these off-label conditions, which is only what we deal with, even if you want to pay $1,000 a session, they wouldn't see you in a hospital because they're only allowed to see these FDA-approved condition clients. Like for wound care, that's a big one. And we can talk about how that works and why that works and how the same factors are at play for people who might want to age well, and to have those considerations addressed. Another one is radiation burns, gas embolisms, things like that. When a lot of people hear about hyperbaric oxygen, they think, oh, is that where, you like get the bends or you have to get it?
It used to be.
It is, yeah. And that's what's happening. You're depressurizing too quickly. You've come up too quickly. And this is a good point, I think, to talk about how one of the ways this really works is, okay, so there's 2 main factors at play when you're doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. You're in an environment that's being pressurized. So almost like a champagne bottle or carbonated drink. I like to drink LaCroix. And so that's bottled under pressure so that when you take the top off, the bubbles come out of solution, which meant they were under pressure for the gas to go into solution. So that's what's happening when you're going under pressure, either in a hyperbaric oxygen setting or as you're going underwater. There's more gas, in this case, oxygen is what we're concerned with, being dissolved into the liquid. So that's useful therapeutically and even medically because it's the red blood cells that carry the oxygen. Like when you do a pulse ox and you're seeing that your red blood cells are saturated 98%, 94%, right? Saturated with oxygen. Well, what we're able to do is, in effect, go beyond 100% because we're bypassing the red blood cells' ability to carry oxygen. Let's just say it's at 100. We're still dissolving oxygen into the blood, into the plasma, the liquid portion of the blood, to be delivered to the end tissues and organs, including the brain. That is why it works for wound healing. That's why it's totally indicated for that.
So much oxygen in there.
Because the red blood cells at these end capillaries where they've been damaged, you can't even fit a red blood cell through that opening. But the liquid will go through and carry the oxygen for healing. That's why it works for wound care.
And then for brain care, it then better crosses the blood-brain barrier. So you're getting more oxygen into the brain.
There, anywhere the blood is going, it allows more oxygen to go. By pressurizing, that's number one, and delivering more oxygen. So now if I'm breathing 90% oxygen instead of 21, that's more oxygen for my body. That's good. You put those two together, that's typically what's at play with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. We use them separately too, by the way.
Tell me more
about that. So there's some people that can't get in the chamber for whatever reason, anxiety or whatever. And so we do the concentrated oxygen when they might be doing other therapies in our office, like a chi machine to get the lymphatic system moving, or while they're doing one of the functional neuro exercises to provide, while you're doing a certain thing, certain areas of the brain and body are utilizing more blood and oxygen, so we can use that in tandem with that idea. There's something called HBOT, exercise with oxygen therapy, where you're actually exercising while you're breathing concentrated oxygen, knowing.
What does that do? What does that make your exercise easier, or you get?
It allows. Yes, it makes it easier, and I think it builds the endurance around what you're trying to achieve by delivering more oxygen.
Okay, so this audience is especially concerned about the brain and about how to stay cognitively sharp. So in your patients, do they need to do this every day? Do they need to do this every week? Do they do a certain number of sessions, and then they're kind of back to okay? What are you seeing? And how early do you have to catch in the cognitive decline process to be able to see the most benefit?
Yeah, there's a few stages of Alzheimer's, and in stage 1 and even 2, it's very helpable. I don't want to use another word than that, because I don't like to.
So that's subjective cognitive decline and mild cognitive decline, MCI, and those two stages. This can help.
Even moderate, yeah. Yeah, and we're exploring some other technologies. We should probably do another podcast. We have a new medical director who's a DO in our sensorium neurowellness, and we're looking at technology out of Germany that has been approved over there for 5 years, but is not FDA approved here. But we're creating an investigational company to bring that in, and along with transcranial magnetic stim and this sound wave technology that is basically dissolving the neurofibril tangles, that we're looking at bringing that in about 2 to 4 months is what we're looking at. So that's a whole nother podcast. I'll get him in here and we can look at that.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, but what you're seeing, getting back to the hyperbaric oxygen. So what you are seeing is that even if someone is noticeably getting forgetful, that putting them under pressure with oxygen really helps to, can we even say reverse Alzheimer's up to a point?
Yeah,
just,
I see
are
that.
They thinking better?
Yeah, I see that as possible. I wouldn't like to say that and make a false claim because it's not going to do that for everybody. But what else are we doing? Are we giving them a medication? Are we,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it makes sense to me. You eat right, you work on your sleep, you work on all these factors, but if we can dial up the oxygen that is in the oxygen perfusion up here and the delivery of oxygen, I've seen it do amazing things, because the body already knows how to work with that nutrient. See, that's how we view it. We view oxygen as a nutrient.
As a nutrient.
The medical community views it, and it's legally considered a drug. You have to be able to write a prescription for 100% oxygen. But I'm happy with 90. And to me, it's safer.
It's better than what we're getting now at 20%. Yeah,
for sure.
So we've talked about the brain. Anything else you want to cover before we move on to some of the other things that HBOT can do?
Well, you asked about cognitive decline. So some of the factors at play when you do hyperbaric oxygen therapy that's been documented and researched is it creates more stem cells in the brain. It creates more BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It specifically creates up to 8 times more stem cell production through this process. It produces sirtuins that are
wonderful.
actually increase the telomere length.
Yeah.
Those are some plays. And the way some of the mechanisms at play there is one of the biggest things. So you're delivering the pressure, you're delivering the oxygen, and over time, and we can come back to frequency and recommendations depending on what somebody's dealing with or trying to achieve. But so you've got the oxygen, you've got the pressure. Those are really good to deliver more oxygen to the brain, but that's not even the biggest thing. Another thing is that as you're coming back up to normal pressure, room temperature, pressure, room pressure, the oxygen that's in solution is coming out of solution and perfusing the area around wherever the blood is. That's a second factor, but the most powerful factor, a third one, is something that happens by what's called relative hypoxia. Okay. The brain and the nervous system, they're not actually going hypoxic or lack of oxygen, which is a trigger for the brain and the nervous system because it thinks it's going to die. So it mounts everything it has to bring healing to play. But just even being relative hypoxia triggers that same sirtuin reaction to bring that to play. So that is one of the main things that's happening in terms of this idea of anti-aging, or aging well, as I like to say.
And you can really get aging well. Yes, you can get that benefit. It seems like coming out of it, it's such a short time. It's your ears pop and pop and pop, and then you're completely back to the room air pressure. But that short time is just enough to induce that relative hypoxia.
It is. Yes, it is. We like to take people down. You should never descend more than 1 PSI per minute, or that's a good thumbnail. And when I say PSI, 1.3 atmospheres under pressure is 4.25 PSI. So it's about, you don't want to go more than quicker than say 4 minutes to pressure and coming up as well. And on that note, with mild hyperbaric oxygen at that level, even if you all of a sudden unzipped it, if that were possible, you're not in danger. You're just might have a headache or something. So again, it's not. Whereas if you decompressed in a heart chamber, just imagine if you came up from 66 to not, you'd be dead.
You'd be in trouble.
Nitrogen narcosis, which is what the bends is. But that the formula does not add up for that to happen the way we do it. Nor does it add up to achieve oxygen toxicity, where that's even a real concern, because the formulas are such that if you're in there for an hour at this pressure, breathing this concentration of oxygen, you're good. We don't even really have to consider that.
When you're talking to your patients about hyperbaric oxygen, what's the response? Is this like a hard sell, or do they just, after you've talked about some of these things, they just jump right to it?
Well, we're really lucky that people find us and they already know what we do. I don't have a big marketing arm of my business, or, people hear about us from word of mouth, or they're just looking for a safe, effective alternative to whatever they're dealing with. And Google, that's probably where we get half of our people find us, through Google. And the other half is either referral from happy clients, or doctors are referring a lot now. We have surgeons, plastic surgeons that are referring to us, and dentists, because to do a series of 5 before and 5 after surgery exponentially minimizes the recovery time, and then minimizes the potential adverse reactions around surgery. So that's really good for the surgeon. So
tell me how that would work. So you go in 5 times, your blood, and then it's very oxygenated by the time you hit the surgical suite.
Yeah.
And then coming out of that, it helps the wound healing. It helps everything that has undergone the trauma of surgery.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah. And you would think like right after might be even more important, because things are healing, but it turns out the front end is even more important to oxygenate the tissue, bring healing capacity to the area that then is going to undergo that trauma, even though it's a trauma on purpose. That's what any surgery is. The body's undergoing that stress. And so before is just as important as after. In fact, if I was going to have an appendectomy or something, I had to split it up, I'd probably do like 7 before and 3 or 4 or 5 after. Well, I'd do a lot more than that, but we're just kind of recommending a package of 10, because that's really doable for people around this idea of leading up to and recovering from surgery in a good way. Whereas regarding frequency for things like cognitive decline, memory, we have our eye on a 20 or more. Really, some of these are going to be like 80 plus. And that's, if I have my eye on 80 or more, that's when I'm recommending somebody might just purchase one to use in their home, or rent one. We're working with a company now that actually can rent them to you, set them up in your house and rent them monthly. In fact, I just recommended that twice in the last week. Once was this morning, where a lady, she has cancer, and she just underwent the chemotherapy and everything they recommended. And now which this is really good for recovering from chemotherapy, by the way. And, she said, I have this much money, I can, how many can I do? And I said, well, that, first of all, I would be doing this every day. And so I would recommend you either buy one or rent one to use in your home once or even twice a day. So that's what I would be recommending for you, given that you have this much money. If she had this much money, well, same thing, really. But then now, if you don't want to do that, then come in here every day. And that's what I recommend for people who are really doing this for a specific reason, like long haul COVID vaccine reactions. That's really why we got this a year ago, because nothing seemed to be touching those things. And so it's been very helpful for that, people recovering and wanting to get back to come out of that brain fog and just that immune shutdown around.
And you've seen efficacy with that.
Definitely. Yeah. And I say, we just sell packages of 20 at a time. Even if people want more, it's like, let's just take it one step at a time and get in those first 10 as quickly as you can. That's what I say all the time. If that's over 2 weeks, then great. If it's over 3 weeks, great. But if you're really going after something like that and you're saying, I just want to do it once a week, I don't think that's enough to really build up the momentum of what's possible. So I think 3 times a week is kind of a minimum if you're really going after something.
And like it's about $100 a pop, $100 a pop. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We charge $120 per session, and a lot of people charge, I think that's a little on the low end. I know people that charge $175, $150, and we do a discount for a package. So it ends up usually being about $108 is what people pay for on average. And kind of where we are really supporting the communities we're in is we don't charge extra. We have larger chambers where two people can get in it, and they each have their own concentrated oxygen port. So that's that same price, whether one or two people are in there. So if you have a partner, you can share that, or we don't buddy people up, but like, oh, meet so-and-so. We don't do that. But like,
Yeah.
and we work with a lot of autistic kids. So I need a parent to go in with them. And that's back to another idea that, we can use this as a standalone without that, because some of them, they won't wear this. So if they can't get in the chamber, we can still do the oxygen. If they can't wear the oxygen, they can still get in the chamber. And now you still have both of these. Yeah. And
they can bring their toys in, and they can hang out in there. Yeah. It's like a playhouse. It's a nest. It is. It's highly cool.
They're scared the first time, but after that, they just run and dive in it.
I bet. Yeah. I bet. So you have access to this unlimited amounts of time.
I do.
But I know you're busy. Do you do this? You are busy. Do you do this every day? Do you do it? How often are you doing it?
There was a 2-week period, probably about a month ago, where I did it every day for 2 weeks.
Every day.
And
wow.
I felt phenomenal. I would get up at 5:30 and do it. And you're reminding me, I really want to do that again. Yeah. But there's some weeks I don't do any, because I'm very busy, and that's no excuse. It's prioritizing things. And I would like to say that it's like meditating, I guess. I'd like to do it 3 times a week.
Aspire to it.
That's what would make me.
So we've talked about a lot of things. We haven't talked about how hyperbaric oxygen helps to fight bacteria, specifically bad bacteria. Mm-hmm. It can do that too, can't it?
Yeah. Anaerobic bacteria doesn't like oxygen. So it's really good for that. And
so that's Lyme, right? Lyme?
Lyme's a spirochete. Is it anaerobic? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I thought it was anaerobic, but
might be. Mm-hmm. It's definitely a spirochete. And but regarding gut microbiome, there are anaerobic and aerobic. So that's one of the kind of side effects. It can create cell die-off, like a healing crisis or Herxheimer reaction.
Reaction.
Pretty much the bad guys in the gut don't like oxygen. So when you're giving that to them, it can shift that in a good way, but the die-off can be symptomatic, where you just get some gastric distress or diarrhea a little bit for a few days. But it's not as common as I thought it would be when I learned about this over a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the gut-brain connection is so important.
Huge.
What would it do to parasites? Because so many of us harbor these critters.
Well, I think, I don't know how they would respond to oxygen, but I know parasites are living in us because there's some kind of imbalance in our immune system. And this is one of the best things I know to boost the immune function in the immune system. But I don't know specifically like how it would affect each person.
How Giardia would do in there. Yeah. Let's see. So you've seen it reductions in cognitive decline. It releases growth factor, stem cells. Have we covered it all?
Stem cells, BDNF, sirtuins. It works by being under pressure, by breathing higher concentrated oxygen. One of the biggest effects is the relative hypoxia that really prompts that healing response. And you're in there about 1 hour and 15 minutes, because we take you down over about 6 minutes, and then you're there for an hour, and then we bring you up over about 4 or 5 minutes. Relatively few contraindications. You have to keep breathing. You have to not have a pulmonary pneumothorax, which you wouldn't be walking around if you did. But the main contraindication, or I need to check everybody's ears, not every time, but just in the beginning, I want to look at the tympanic membrane, make sure there's no indications of infection or redness or bulging. And if they have had trouble with their ears clearing on an airplane or going up and down a mountain, we just have to be on heightened alert that might be a problem, because the ears have to be able to equalize. If they don't, then the pressure builds and it's very uncomfortable. But we're descending very slowly, and they just have to raise their hand. There's a window in it and say, hey, this is not clearing, and then we'll slow it down. Yeah, it might not be a good day. Yeah. It happened to my wife a few times when she was having sinus pressure. And
oh, really?
Wow. I like to do this before flying, and I like to do my Methylene Blue before flying, because as we've talked about, that when you're flying up in an airplane, you're only breathing 16% oxygen. That's the main cause of jet lag, is that you're not even breathing 21. Really? Yeah. Because they only pressurize it to about 3,000 feet. They don't and you're flying higher than that, but they only pressurize it to a certain degree so that, you're breathing about 16% oxygen instead of 21 for the time that you're in flight. And so that's why Methylene Blue is a game changer for that, because it can pick up the slack on that and kind of acts like oxygen, and it's in that effect anyway.
You tend to want to go to sleep on a plane. I find I get real sleepy, and that's because of the lower amount of oxygen.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
And I've heard before I learned about that it could be the change over magnetic lines. It's not really the like time change so much. It's the magnetic line. But I really believe it's because I've not had jet lag in the probably 5 times I've flown over the last 6 months since I started taking Methylene Blue.
Interesting.
Like my sleep, my whirring is even better when I'm like, it used to be terrible when I was away, like sleeping in a hotel. Now it's just
you're not familiar with the surroundings, and
yeah.
And for those interested in JoJo and I have talked about Methylene Blue before. We did a podcast on cutting edge health with a Dr. Francisco Gonzalez Lima from the University of Texas, Austin. And he's done research in Methylene Blue and how it helps to provide more oxygen to the mitochondria of your brain. And very important, because when he did autopsies in Sun City of people with and without dementia when they passed, the ones with dementia all had a deficiency of their mitochondria. And he found that if you give them Methylene Blue, that deficiency sparks a certain enzyme that creates the right oxygen to the mitochondria of the brain. Fascinating stuff.
That's amazing.
Exciting.
I take it every day now, because I really like to function up here instead of just here. Yeah. And
so you have a blue mouth every day.
I do. Yeah. Not now.
It goes away by the end of the morning. Day. Yeah. I did too.
and I let it like really stay in my mouth when I fly. So I'm sure I am quite a sight to see.
Yeah, your seatmates. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with that guy?
Yeah.
Dr. Yonce, thank you. Thank you for your time and for how you're helping people.
Thank you, Jane.
It's very important work.
So good to see you. You've inspired me to put something behind my desk. I want a logo on my wall of our new Sensorium logo, but I haven't ordered it yet. I love your plan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Hope you do too.
You've been listening to the Cutting Edge Health Podcast, created and hosted by Jane Rogers. The website is cuttingedgehealth.com. We hope you enjoyed the show and would very much appreciate your writing a review. They help a lot, and we read each one. Any information shared on this podcast is for educational purposes only. Guest opinions are their own. This podcast is not responsible for the veracity of their statements. The comments expressed are not medical advice. Do not use any of this information without first talking to your doctor. This podcast and Jane Rogers disclaim responsibility for any adverse effects from the use of any information presented. Thank you for listening and have a beautiful day.